So we're on Daf Pei Hamid Beis, and we're mamish at the bottom of the Omud. Mecharo Vadayin Yeshno Bershuso. So the case is he kidnapped someone, but it's still it's the Nignav is still in his own reshus. No, the Ganav did not get a chance to pull the Nignav into his reshus. Potter. So it doesn't matter who he sold the Nignav to, he's chayav. Hagonev es havodim potter. Now the reason why Hagonev es havodim potter is because the Torah says umeis haganav hahu, and the word hahu is a mute, and it comes to exclude a gonev ever. Okay, now we turn to Daf Pei Vav. Oh, Steve, how are you? So I don't know if you have a Gemara Sanhedrin Pei Vav. Tani Tana Kame Derav Sheshes. So we have an Amora who would, generally speaking, teach the Braisos in the presence of Rav Sheshes. Now we had a Braisa on Daf Pei Hamid Beis that if a person steals another person, meaning he kidnaps him, abducts him, and then he sells him as an eved to the guy's own father, he's chayav. Amalei Rav Sheshes says, "Ani shoneh, I want to add something to this brisa." Rabbi Shimon Omer, Mei echav. Right, the pasuk says, "Gonev, kimotze ish gonev nefesh mei echav." Right? Gonev mei echad indicates that he took the person out of the reshus of his brothers. Why did the Torah say brothers? To indicate that he was sold away from the family, so to speak. Now you're telling me that if he sells the nignav to the father, he'd be chayav for that? Why should he be chayav for that? It's achi yotzienu reshus echad. And the Gemara says, Tnei, we're going to have to change the brisa, and it's going to say potter, that if a person sells the nignav to the father of the nignav, or to any of his brothers, that he's potter. So the Gemara saw this as a stira, and there was no way out unless we change the girsa. My kusha. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute. I don't think that this quote of Reb Shimon has to contradict the Brisa. Dilma, Reb Shimon, Rabbana. The Brisa was not written to reflect the Shita of Reb Shimon. And Enochinabi, the Rabbanan Shita would be that even if you sold him to a member of the family, and he stayed within the same family, nevertheless you'd be chayav. Reb Shimon would hold Mei Achiv Achi Yotzienu Mershus Achiv. And he's pot. So the Gemara says, Lo salka dait. We couldn't entertain such a possibility. Why? The Omer of Yochanan, Stam Masnisin Rabbi Meir. When you have a Mishnah which is anonymous, then it reflects the Shita we assume of Rabbi Meir. Stam Tosefta, if you have a Brisa and it's anonymous, Rab Nechemi. We assume it's the opinion Rab Nechemi. Stam Sifra, if you have what's called a Toras Kohanim or a Sifra and a Sefer Vayikra, Rabbi Yehudin. We assume it reflects the Shita Rabbi Yehudin. Stam Sifrei, right? Sifrei is a collection of midrashim on Bamidbar and Dvarim, Rabbi Shimon. The Kulu, Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. And all the Tanoim that we mentioned accepted the view of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, whatever they taught whether it's in a brisa or a sifri, a sifra, etc., they were all transmitting what they learned from Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, the brisa that we saw before that was presented to Rav Sheshes, which is called Stam Sifri, and we darshan in the pasuk Kimot Say, and that's in Chumash Dvarim, that reflects the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. You can't tell me that it reflects the Shita of the Chachamim, who argue against Rabbi Shimon. Because we said that Stam Sifrei, Rabbi Shimon. So that's why Rav Sheshes was compelled to change the girsa so there wouldn't be a stira between the brisa and Rav Shimon, because the brisa, which is a Sifri, is related to or attributed to Rabbi Shimon. Now the Mishnah says, Hagonev Beno, he abducted his own son, and the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, Benosha Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, that he's chayiv, and the Chacham say Yipot. My time of the Rabbanan. Why should a person be potter when he abducted his son and sold his son as as a slave on the market? Amar Abaye, the Amar Kra. Pasuk says Ki Motzeh. Prat Limatsui. One second. Ki Motzeh. Limatsui means someone that's with him. Matsui means they live in, they live in the same quarters, like a son lives in the father's house. And ki matsei means the opposite of matsui. So Gemara asks, Amale Rav Papa Abaye Elame Ata. Let's look at another pasuk. In Parshas Ki Teitze, it says, Ki matzei ish ochevim imisha ba'ulas baal. And again, you're going to interpret that Hachinami ki matzei prat lematsui. Now, what would be prat lematsui? Kigon shall base ploni. Let's say you have many families that lived in the same house, under the same roof, the shchicha gabayu. And, there's a lot of interaction between the men and the women in that house. Is Hochinami the Petire? Would you say that this man is potter in the adulterous relation that he had just simply because it's Motzui? They're all living in the same house? Certainly that's not the case. So ki matzeh does not mean that it's got to be, something that's not motzu, and it excludes, and it's mamayit motzu. So therefore, as far as gonev nefesh is concerned, you can't say that from ki matzeh we're going to exclude a gonev espino who's motzu yetzer. And this was the argument of Rav Papa that he presented to Abaye. And it would seem that Abaye accepted the argument of Rav Papa that ki matzeh does not imply a mir to exclude someone who's matzui. But Amalei no mi v'nimtza biyado kamrin. My intention was not to derive it from ki matzeh, but from v'nimtza biyado. So I have a footnote here. He's trying to explain why v'nimtza biyado is different than ki matzeh. And he says that the words v'nimtza biyado are completely superfluous. Why? Because we already have ki matzeh. So after you have ki matzeh, what do you need v'nimtza biyado for? It's just simply a repetition. So Abai says that the Chachamim see this superfluous phrase of an imtza biyada, which could have been omitted completely by the Torah, as coming to be mamaye to exclude a motzui tadir. And that's why Gonev Espino is pot. So that's Abai. Okay, Amar Rava, Hilkach. Wow, this is pretty way out. Hani mikre dedardiki, umasni rabbanon kimitzuyim biyadam dami uptira. Wow, this is wild. We're talking about, school children, and the children are considered mitzuyim biyadam. They're always to be found, so to speak, in those days they were, they taught Torah, I guess, in the home. So you'll always find these children in the house of the Rebbe. And therefore, we're going to exclude pretty scary halacha here. He's saying that if a teacher abducts a child in his class and sells him as an eved, he's not chayav misa because of the drush of Abaya of an imtza biyado. Prat lemotzi, and this is motzi. It's difficult for me to conceptualize this. Just 1 minute. So how does this work? I just want to go back to the Mishnah again, just for a second. The Mishnah on Pehei is Beis. I just want to see if maybe I missed something there. Agonev es beno, kachamim potrin. Right? Now, Abaye is saying, and the way Rava says it, it's v'nimtza biyado. And prat lemotzu. I mean, the best I can say is the following. I'm far from satisfied, but that do you hear that? I don't know if it disturbs you. Anyway, in order to be chayav misa for abducting a person and then selling him, we need a maisa gneva, like you took that person out of his house. But if he's living in your house, so again, I don't think it's a moral statement here. I mean, obviously, we're perplexed about the morality issue here that's going on, but just on a technical level, the mechanics of it is that you did a maisa gneva. So you went into someone else's house and you abducted that person. But if that person lives in the same house as you, then you didn't do a maisa gneva. The same applies to Talmidim. The Talmidim are already motzui. They're in the, in the yeshiva of the Rebbe, the base medrash of the Rebbe. So that's called motzui biyad. Because Geneva means to take someone from another rishus and schlep him into your rishus. Now, on a moral level, I mean, I would say just the opposite. He's more guilty. To take a relative of yours, a son of yours, and sell him out there as an evidence. Take your Talmud. Today we hear about all the sexual abuse and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Now, this is not a sexual abuse case, but still, to take advantage of the fact that these Talmidim are under his supervision and then kidnap him, I mean, that seems like the lowest of the low. You know what I mean? So on a moral level, I don't know how to, if you have any ideas, I don't know how to justify this, but at least in terms of the mechanics of the halacha, I think I got a clue. It's not a maisa gneva if he's motzi. So what's the deal if a son would abduct his own father? Let's go back again to the Mishnah for a second. Agoneves beno. So wait, so what do we had Goneves Aviv, just 1 second. Oh, here it is. Machro. I don't know. That's machro le'achiv. That's something else. Do you have I don't know, Reuven, are you still there? I was wondering if you have any notes on Gonev Beno. What about Gonev Aviv? That's one question that I have here. All right. Then we had the case of Machro Le'aviv, Oli Achiv, and he's Potter. So we could say it all stays in the same family. It's sort of like Achei Yosef, you know. They're going to sell him. But they're not selling him to one of the Shvatim. Okay, and then we had a case where you sold an Eved. And we said that if you sold an Eved, then you're Potter. And now we have the case where he sold an Eved that's a Chatzi Eved Ben Chorim. And that the Gemara, the Mishnah records already, Machlok Shrin Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham. It's not a Hassam. So this is a Mishnah Bava Kama Pei Zayin. I'll read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Achovel bi Eved Knani shel Acherim chayav bekulam." So you know the Chavola generates 5 different chiyuvim, and the Tanakama applies that same standard of Chavola to the case of a Chavola be'Eved Knani. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ein la'avadim boshes. So out of the 5 categories, we have to take out boshes. My time with Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Kra. I mean, I don't know exactly why Rabbi Yehuda has to be based on a pasuk. You know, one could have argued it's almost intuitively logical that there's no boshes by an Eved. But Amar Kra, the pasuk says, as far as boshes, ki notzu anoshim yachtov ish v'yachiv, is mishi yesh lo ach v'yotze eved shein lo ach. Now, what does it mean that an Eved has no achva? I mean, he may have brothers and they share the same father. Yeah, but the father is not Jewish. So the Eved is not miyuchas to his father after he undergoes gerus. So there's no yichus mishpacha, and therefore he doesn't come under the category of mishi yesh lo ach. Rabbanon, right? We said that according to the Rabbanon is the Chovel Bevet Kanani pays all 5 categories of Chavol, Dmei Chavol, including Boshes. Is Achivu b'mitzvahs. So we don't need Achva of Yuchsin, but rather we need Achva of mitzvahs. Scale of mitzvah. Achva of mitzvahs. So who can collect Boshes? According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's got to be someone who has Yuchsin. And according to Rabbanon, it's someone who has mitzvahs. So that's an afkamina as far as Eved Kanani is concerned. On the one hand, he's chayav in mitzvahs, but on the other hand, he doesn't have yuchsin. So does he collect demei boshes? Now, with regard to Gonev Ishu Mecharo, so we said that Rabbi Yehuda would say Yechayev and the Chacham say Yepot. That's in a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin case. So what would be if a case of a full-fledged Eved? Sounds like you'd be Potter. As far as Boshes is concerned, the Rabbanan hold that he collects Boshes because Achiv hu b'mitzvahs. So let's see, by Geneva, apparently an Eved is excluded if he steals an Eved. But if the Eved is a victim of Boshes through Chavola, then according to the Rabbanan, you are chayev, even though if you abducted and sold him, you would not be chayev. So let's see if the Gemara clarifies this. For Hacha, as far as Geneva is concerned, right, it says Ish, ki motzei Ish gonev nefesh mei achiv, no, mei echav, I should read it, is Hechi Dorish. And I understand the Gemara is asking on Rabbi Yehuda or on the Rabbanan. So why is the Gemara asking a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda held that achiv means yesh lo achva, and eved is excluded because ain't lo achva. And therefore, what? So again, what does it mean? V'hacha hechi darish. What's bothering the Gemara? I mean, we have the word mi'achav in two places. We have it in Gonev Ish, and we have it in Chavola. And in Chavola, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that you don't pay boshes to an eved because ain't lo achma. And here also the eved is excluded from the chiyuv of Gonev Ish because it says nefesh me'echav. So why is Gemara asking hechi darsh? I don't know. I don't understand the hava mina here. Anyway, the Gemara's answer is Rabbi Yehuda savar me'echav lafuke avodim. Okay, that's good. Rabbi Yehuda is very consistent. Me'echav, it's got to be me'echav in yuchsin, to the exclusion of Misha Ein Lo Ach. Eved is Ein Lo Ach. Now what about the case of Chetzi Eved, Chetzi Ben Chor? Bnei Yisrael. Right, it says, Ki Motzei Ish Gonev Nefesh Me'echav Mi Bnei Yisrael. So Mi Bnei Yisrael is Lemu'ute Misha Chetzio Eved V'Chetzi Ben Chor. So if you only had the word me'echav, then you'd say that if you abduct an eved, you're not chayav misa because he's a full-fledged eved. But if he's half an eved and half a ben chorin, maybe you'd be chayav for abducting him because the half ben chorin makes him into echav. But the pasuk adds bnei Yisrael, and that's an extra mute. L'm'utei misha chetzio eved chetzi ben chorin. Heavy mute achamir ein michrach michel l'rabos. So wait a minute. So who shita is the Gemara explaining now? L'rabos. That if you sell a chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin, you chayav. But that can't be Rabbi Yehuda. Oh, that's Rabbi Yehuda, right? So we have a ribui for chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin. So on the one hand, an eved is excluded under echav because Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that ein lo achva, he doesn't have yichus. But if he's a chetzio eved chetzi ben chorin, then the pasuk of Bnei Yisrael, which would be another miyut, is ein miyut achar miyut el rabos, is going to be marbe chetzio eved chetzi ben chorin for the chiv and kneva. For Rabbanan, right? Rabbanan, our Mishnah said that chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin is patur. Me'echav lafuki avodim lo mashmor. Why is that? Because an eved is chayv mitzvahs ki isha. Maybe that's what he means. Oh yeah, it says it explicitly. Ta'achiv hu b'mitzvahs. Is Bnei Yisrael. It says, Ki motzei ish gonev nefesh me'echav mi bnei Yisrael. So Bnei Yisrael itself is a miut, and mi Bnei Yisrael, the mem is also a miut. Chad lemute eved, chad lemute misha chetzio eved chetzi ben chor. Okay. So this is where we'll stop. If you're interested, for the next 10 minutes, we'll learn a little bit of Parsha. Okay, then?
Steve, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have here a sefer called Shem Mishmuel from the Socket Shover Rebbe. And we'll take a look in Parshas Korach. Got pages and pages here. Maybe just we'll focus in on one. Okay. The Osro Som Rekue Pachim Sipulim is bare. So what happens? Hashem tests the gathering, the assembly of Korach with a fire of the Ketores. And they are called upon to take what's called Rekue Pachim, which means pans. They put the Ketores in a pan. And after this whole episode, this whole catastrophe, the Torah commands that we take those Rekue Pachim and we use it as a tzipui l'mizbeach. Tzipui means like a framework, right? The mizbeach initially, before the story of Korach Adaso, was made of a framework, and then they put earth in the framework. And then they would bring the karbonos on top of the mizbeach. But after the mice of Korach, the mizbeach had to have a different framework, and the framework was made of Rekue Pachim. Now, these Rekue Pachim were the pans that were brought by Korach Adaso, and yet they're being used for the mizbeach. So he writes, Ech nasa me avera mitzvah. How can we take something that's an avera and convert it to a mitzvah, as a high, very high element of mitzvah in the mizbeach? He says, "B'rishona yamakrim al adoma." Right? They filled up the framework with soil, with dirt. So that krova was on the adoma. The ato, but now nasu rekue pachim tzipulim mizbeach. Hayimachasim es ha'adoma. Right, so they would cover the ground with this framework, And the framework, he says, was made of nechoshes. Those were the pans that were brought. Umakrivim ala nechoshes. And on top of the frame, they would bring the karbonos. Yesh lahavin. He asked the following question: Lama tzivsa Torah l'shanos sakrava mimasha hoisa. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. That after Korach and his rebellious crew, they changed the whole nature of the mizbeach. And Akrava was no longer on the Adama, but rather on the Nechoshes, which I think translates as brass, if I'm not mistaken. If the framework was meant to be from brass, then why wasn't it commanded from the get-go that the Mizbeach should be made of a brass framework of Nechoshes? Why only after the... And then you're taking something that was used for an Avera. He says, "V'hine yesh lahavin lama haya nisayon v'machtos shel nechoshes." Why were these pans, these machtos, made of brass? And that was the command of the Torah. V'lo b'shel zahav. The Ketores is always brought on zahav, on a machtos shel zahav. For example, on Yom Kippurim, when the Kohen Gadol goes l'fnai v'lifnim with the Ketores, it's on a machta of zav. Not only that, the entire mizbeach, he says, is a mizbeach of zav. Va'afilu ha'machta shel gecholim shebechol yom shebachnisan al mizbeach ha'pnimi nami hoisa b'shel zav. And the pans that we used for the daily ketores, not just on Yom Kippurim, were pans that were made of gold. And he quotes a mission to prove this. So the question is that the Ketores that's brought by the Korach Adaso as part of this Mivchan, this test, should be the same Ketores as the real McCoy Ketores, which would mean it would be on Zav, not on Nechoshes. V'nire, Tehine Mahus Hamatachos. I guess Mahus means the... symbolic, metaphoric meaning of each one of the various metals. Zahav romes liyira. So the gold is a metaphor for fear. Kesef li'avam. Unechoshes lios takif b'daito va'oz. Like the word nechoshes, that metal is symbolic of a certain kind of power of conviction. You know, when you're convinced of something and you're willing to fight for it, that's called oz. And the oz in metals is nechoshes. Heavy az kanamer. You know, the Mishnah says that when you're fighting out of conviction, you believe in a cause, you know, fight all the way like an amer, you know, fight like a lion. Unechoshes, lios takif b'daito. So nechoshes means he's takif b'daito. K'moshekasa b'Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah praises the Jewish people, and he says, "Ani hinena saticha hayom lechomos nechoshes." You're like walls made of brass. That's your power of conviction. Ukshubitmura, and the opposite, right? Everything on the holy side has its negative side. The opposite of this takif b'daito for kedusha is oz shel azus panim. You know, those who are, I'm looking for the English word for azus panim. If you have one, let me know. Audacity, or, you know, aggressive, you know, undermine the Torah scholars. That's called the Azepon. And he quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya. Yeshaya comes down with hard rebuke against Jewish people. Umetzecha nechusha. So again, the word nechoshes, but here it's used in a negative way. So apparently this trait, this midah, that is symbolically or metaphorically represented by nechoshes, can work in one of two ways, like every single midah. You could use it for the good if you have a conviction for a cause and you stand up for the cause, or you could use it for the opposite. And then it becomes azus ponim. V'hine, adas korach, sherotzu lahakriv lifnei Hashem, right? They wanted to undermine and replace Aaron to take the kahuna for themselves. Is they represent the opposite of Aaron. Aaron represents Boshes, like for example, when Moshe told Aaron to go be makriv, he was Bosh, l'karev el mizbeach, and these guys, Korach, they had the azus ponim. They had the exact opposite of the busha of Aaron. They were brazen, they were bold and aggressive. We want to take over the avodah. Umi kol makom, kshiba kedusha, when they want to take over, not, they don't want to subjugate, slaves or anything like that, abduct people and sell them as slaves. They want to use it for kedusha. They want to bring karbanos. V'hanami midatova. There is a certain azus here, a certain boldness and brazenness of the korach adasa. That's a positive element. It's a midah tova, lios az kenomer. V'lo od, he quotes now in Medrash and Shmos Rabbah that Zahav, Kesef, and Nechoshes parallel Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So that Nechoshes parallels Yaakov. And Yaakov is the Bechira Avos. He's the highest level of the three Avos. And he's represented by Nechoshes. V'chein b'zor HaKadosh b'posuk b'shav golov ato teshavchem. So that Yaakov Avinu is gonna fight against Lavan and against Esav. He's the azus the kedusha, the boldness of the nechoshes in a positive way. So the midah of nechoshes is the midah of Yaakov Avinu, and the machtos that are being brought by Korach Adoso are the machtos of azus, of boldness, and they're made of nechoshes. Because nechoshes, so again, there's some midah from Yaakov Avinu, which is represented symbolically by nechoshes, which is inherited or adopted by Korach Adoso. That impetus and strong conviction. We are there to be the Kohen. Valkeid. Adas Korach shebikshu l'shareis lifnei Melech. Melech meaning King of Kings. He midas hanechoshes midos shel Yaakov. V'alkein hoyu amachtos shel nechoshes. Right, every Torah is brought on gold, but this Torah will be brought on the pans made of brass, in order to indicate that we have here, so to speak, the descendants of Yaakov. Yaakov is nechoshes, who want to do the avodah of the Kohen. He says, "Lefi zeh yuvan masha nasa me'avera zula mitzvah." We can begin to understand why that avera is going to be used for a mitzvah on the mizbeach, because again, the fundamental shoresh, the root of the impetus of Korach, is from the nechoshes of Yaakov Avinu, from that strong will and conviction that we want to be the ones to do the avodah. Ki chelek hatov shebemaisa, like we said before, the nechoshes and the azus could go in one of two ways, and the tov that's inherent in the nechoshes is the midah of Yaakov Avinu. When they took it to its an extreme and they turned it from Azus the Kedusha to Azus Panim, and they said, well, we are the greatest, we want to be the Kohanim. Husha Omar Eish Zora Hola. Aval Guf Machtos Hanachoshes, but when we focus on the Machtos themselves, which are made of Nechoshes, that's the Ruach Az. That's the Midah of Yaakov Avinu. That wasn't lost. It came to fruition, expressing itself in Korach Vados. The Afshe Nenshu al Afroshas Hamida, of course, they'll be punished for, this converting the Midah into Az's Panim, into something very aggressive that they wanted for themselves. But nevertheless, since they get schar, they deserve some sort of reward for the tov, the kavanah tova of the machtos that were made in a choshes. Therefore, nasa miset sipui lemizbeh. Okay, then. So we'll stop here. All right. Good to see you back, Steve. And you'll tell us a little bit more about the Windy City. We got plenty of wind here. We don't have to. We have to go to Chicago for that. So let me wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Colton.